Does anyone know a Scientologist? They're pretty rare. There's not too many of them. Let's see if I can share my screen. Keynote.
It was a big thing when I was a teenager.
Yeah, the 70s were real big for Scientology. 60s, 70s. L. Ron Hubbard.
Hey, I read L. Ron Hubbard's books.
Yeah. It's science fiction.
Yeah, he wasn't that good of a science fiction writer.
All right, Scientology. Let's do a little bit of an introduction. Scientology didn't begin as a religion, but more of a personal technology, a way to release the things that block the mind from enlightenment, from understanding who you truly are as a spirit. And so when L. Ron Hubbard wrote Dianetics, his first work on this type of healing for mental illness and for psychological fears and phobias and things like that, it was all kind of an alternative form of medicine to psychology and psychiatry, as well as even modern medicine. Although as you now progress through the upper echelons of Scientology, it becomes more and more religious, and you start to learn more and more about some of the inner workings of creation, of the universe, of this God-like being that is impersonal but still powerful. And we're going to talk all about that in this session today. It's founded by L. Ron Hubbard, or his first name is Lafayette Ron Hubbard, and he was a science fiction writer, and he founded the religion back in 1954. It claims about 8 million adherents worldwide. However, it's hard to designate who exactly is an adherent or a member. They don't keep membership rosters. And so most critics have guessed maybe 40,000 worldwide is a more likely type of number for how many Scientologists there are in the world. As a religion, it can be complicated to understand. It's not out there like Christianity. You can't do a whole lot of research on it ahead of time from trusted authoritative sources. And those who often attempt to define the religion are usually threatened publicly with lawsuits, harassment, character assassination. So kind of the core of Scientology is hidden from public grasp, other than the works, the books, the things that they want the public to see. In essence, you need to pay in order to advance and learn the secret intricacies of Scientology and what true freedom from the things that hold us back in life are. Although its main texts are available to the public, these secret texts are given to those who advance through a long series of expensive training courses. So if you want to become a Scientologist, you don't go to a Scientologist worship service. There really are not too many of those, and they're not regular except in various places around the country and around the world. But what you do is you go to meet one-on-one with somebody in a Scientology reading room who will recommend books for you, who will do kind of an introductory overview of Scientology, and then will offer you this personalized training course that we'll talk about in a little bit, called auditing. It's almost more counseling than it is like a worship service or a religion. Its official publications provide historical and statistical information about L. Ron Hubbard and about Scientology that often contradicts official US military and governmental records. And so what Scientologists put forward often is at odds with what outside sources, including the government and the military, we'll talk about. We'll talk about what those military records are, especially when it comes to L. Ron Hubbard's military service in the Navy. Some key teachings of Scientology are that humans are immortal spirits called thetas. There's no apostrophe there. thetas, and these are these internal spirits that live within us, that kind of have a shell of a body around us. So man is not um, a body and spirit like we talk about in Christianity. We are our spirit, soul, and body all in one integrated person. But rather for Scientologists, you are this theta, this spiritual being, and you have a mind and you have a body. But ultimately, you are a mortal spirit. And the crux of this spirit is this innate need to survive, this instinct, this drive to survive beyond death, which I think all of us can relate to. This kind of desire to not just be cease to exist when our bodies die or when our loved ones dies, but to live on forever. And so this is kind of the crux of the Scientologist spirit, is that innate need to survive. And this all kind of came about really during the Cold War, when it was kind of Americans' desire to survive and make it past nuclear annihilation. And so this really kind of helped you understand that you would survive even if everything in the world fell apart. And this spirit is given or brought about by this life-giving principle of the universe called theta. And so I got this wrong. So we're not thetas, we're thetans or thetans, given by theta or theta, however you want to pronounce it. So thetans are essentially good, is the core teaching, but part of our mind records past traumas called engrams. And these past traumas can either happen to us consciously, things that we're aware of. It can also be traumas that occurred while we were in the womb. And I think a majority of your traumas happened while you were in the womb and you weren't really understanding what was going on around you, but you felt your mother's emotions and experiences. These engrams also could be from past lives. So reincarnation is a big core tenet for Scientology as well. So these past lives, these past bodies that you inhabited with past minds, you may not be able to articulate them, but they are these physical, literal things that are within your cells that block you from being spiritually free. So they have mass and they accumulate over time. And they can lead a thetan to falsely identify with the material world. So in some ways, it's much like Eastern religion that claims the material world is evil, impermanent, something that's not to be attached to, but rather to identify with your spiritual self rather than your material self. And so these engrams can lead to madness, addiction, anxiety, crime, war, depression, really any negative feeling that you experience is a result of these engrams from past traumas or past misdeeds in your life or in a previous life. And so you can see how anybody with a problem seeking a solution could be potentially drawn in to a solution for this problem. We can cure your phobia. We can cure your anxiety. We can cure your addiction. Just pay us some money. We'll walk you through this auditing session. We'll give you the tools, the resources, pay us a little bit more money, and you'll advance through the levels of spiritual enlightenment until you finally go clear. And that's the first goal of any thetan, is to go clear through religious technology, which in essence is almost a lie detector type of a machine where you hold on to two metal bells and it detects electronic energy flowing through your body as you answer questions about your fears, about your lives, about your secrets, about your hopes and your dreams. An auditor can help you identify and eliminate those engrams in your body, in your life, so that you can go clear. There's also a book called Going Clear, and it kind of exposes some of the hypocrisy behind Scientology. A very, very, really well done history, really easy and kind of a fun read. So if you're interested in knowing more about Scientology, the book Going Clear is a really good book. So Going Clear entails having perfect mental recall. That these are some of the things that they espouse that can happen once you identify and eliminate your engrams. You have an increased IQ. You become free from negative emotions and disruptive attitudes and psychosomatic illnesses. So in some ways, they claim that the illnesses you experience are because of these engrams that are a part of you. And so if you can rid yourselves of these negative feelings, these addictions, these anxieties, then you quite possibly may never get sick ever again. Although Scientologists do get sick, they claim you are at least healthier than the average person because of your work with spiritual technology. Once you go clear, you pursue the bridge to total freedom. And so Scientology's publication house is actually called The Bridge. And once you go clear, then you start to participate in an expensive curriculum and training to achieve a higher initiation called an operating thetan. And in order to fully go through the entire curriculum, it costs about $400,000 for an individual in order to become an operating thetan of the highest level. I believe there's 8 different levels of operating thetans. And each initiation time, you get more information, more knowledge, more secret gnosis about the universe, about creation. Some of those secret teachings are available to you there, as well as social clout and prestige within the organization itself. So these higher levels gain confidential scriptures, which reveal strange aspects of the universe's ancient history, which in the information age has begun to be shared even against Scientology's wishes in public. So you can indeed find a lot of this information on the internet and in various books about these sacred secret texts. They claim that operating thetans also gain supernatural power and can do things like heal goldfish that are sick, conduct remote viewing so that you can see in your mind what's going on in different parts of your house, community, or even the world. You develop telepathy. You can even cut a person in half with considerable electronic flow. So in theory, these are things that operating thetans can do because of the fact that they are clear and on the way to total freedom from the constraints of this material world and material body. Celebrity centers also become very important in Scientology. Of course, the one in Los Angeles being the most famous. And this is really a place where famous Scientologists or famous celebrities are recruited and turned into Scientologists, and then they're pampered greatly at these places. And so those who desire foot in the door of the industry in Hollywood will come to these centers and will really embrace Scientology in a lot of ways in order to further their career. And we find countless examples of people who that's one of the main reasons they entered Scientology, but then once they were in, they were stuck. And we'll kind of talk about why you get stuck in Scientology. Before I go any further, are any questions that you have about any of this? All right. So new Scientologists are also drawn to Scientology by a cost-effective approach to mental health. More cost-effective than is available from modern medicine, psychologists, psychiatrists, family doctors. And so whereas without insurance, some of those doctor visits can cost between a couple $100s. Scientologists will offer you a $50 introductory session or a $100 auditing session. So involving an e-meter, and here's a picture of it up in the corner. There's this, it measures minute electrical currents and can help you identify and eliminate unconscious past traumas. So you're in a room alone with another individual, an auditor, who's trained in reading this meter, and he will gauge the amount of electrical current flowing through you as you answer questions. And so if there's a spike in electrical flow, he will continue to press into that more and more, ask you further, more probing questions until he'll, and then often leading questions, getting you to identify past traumas in your life. And sometimes those past traumas are things that you remember, and sometimes he'll lead you into things that you experienced in the womb, or as I said before, in past lives. And so once you identify that, then you are given a little bit of homework to work on in order to free yourself from the constraints of those particular traumas. One can help a person master his own fears and drive out the evils of modern society by regular use of auditing. Scientologists believe that their religion is not based on blind faith or prophetic authority. So they don't claim that L. Ron Hubbard received supernatural revelation, but they claim that Scientology, which is evident in the name Scientology, is based on things that are self-evident. It's not dogmatic. It's not based on spirituality as much as it's based on experience of the world, of our mind, of things around us. So instead of having to defend their religion, all they can say is, well, it's self-evident. Everyone will understand this is the way the world works if you really are open to it. In 1954, he penned a 21-line creed, and this creed is posted within most Scientology centers, emphasizing basic rights, and most importantly, the basic rights of Scientology, that they should be free from governmental interference. Part of that creed is that man is basically good, that his ultimate goal is to survive, that his survival depends on himself and his fellows and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe. So rather than where Christianity is based on grace and forgiveness, Scientology is a works-based religion based on your own ability to do the hard work of auditing, of being a good person, and advancing spiritually to the level of operating Thetan and being totally free. The spirit can be saved, and the spirit alone may heal the body. So in essence, L. Ron Hubbard wrote his book Dianetics as an alternative form of medicine, and when it was rejected, he kind of pushed back against medicine altogether and really pushed for utilizing spiritual technology in the auditing sessions in order to heal physical ailments, deformities, and sicknesses. Questions or thoughts?
So I just ask, so this seems like the framework or the background is kind of has a Gnostic worldview, that the material things are bad and that there's secret knowledge that you have to advance to receive.
Yep, and that's kind of where we'll end up today. Is that, yeah, Scientology is squarely within the realm of Gnosticism, which first gained popularity in the 1st and 2nd centuries after Jesus. And you're right, it was based on secret knowledge, individual responsibility to attain that secret knowledge and act on it. And yeah, that there is the body, the material world was evil, while the mind of the spirit was good. And so in Gnosticism, that played out in either disciplining the body and controlling it so that it didn't attach to material things. Or on the flip side, Gnosticism said, well, this body is evil. It doesn't matter. It's not connected to my spirit, so I can do with my body whatever I want. And it led to a large amount of hedonism as well. So Scientology is kind of a middle ground. It kind of states that there's really nothing good or bad, that unless it either helps or hinders the goal of Scientology or you becoming free. So there's not necessarily like dogma that states that things are inherently righteous or evil, but whatever helps you to go clear is good, and whatever hinders you from going clear is evil.
I thought it was interesting that poster on the last slide had a cross in the background where it said the creed.
Mm-hmm.
The background of it shaped like a cross, even though it doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, it's. I'll skip down here. The main symbol of Scientology is
Yeah.
an 8-pointed cross that represents the 8 dynamics of life, or aspects of existence that Thetans pass through in their quest for ultimate survival. So they really say it has nothing to do with the cross of Jesus. It was kind of based on a different occult type cross of Aleister Crowley that he had created. Because L. Ron Hubbard was associated with Aleister Crowley through one of Aleister Crowley's followers named Jack Parsons. And so this kind of, a lot of critics believe that they adopted the cross to give Scientology credibility as a religion, because it kind of looked like a Christian cross. But they deny that the cross has any significance for anything in the.
Yeah. I think some people could be visually kind of subconsciously attracted to that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and then the lower symbol down here is the Scientology main symbol, the S for Scientology, and then 2 triangles. The lower one representing affinity, reality, and communication, kind of the individual's responsibility for achieving true self-awareness, that you have a kind of an affection for knowledge, that you can communicate about your reality and understand that you're a spirit trapped in a material body. And then the upper triangle talks about knowledge, responsibility, and control. And this is kind of the pinnacle of Gnosticism, because it states that secret knowledge about the universe is crucial, along with taking responsibility for pursuing that knowledge, as well as control. And we kind of find throughout the religion that control is a major part of Scientology, both controlling yourself and kind of control of the secret knowledge within the institution. L. Ron Hubbard, born in 1911 and died in 1986, was a charismatic, creative genius. He was an author, like I said, of science fiction. He could write engaging tales of alternate universes, written, thousands of years in the future. He also loved to kind of spin his own origin story about his global adventures and military exploits. For example, he claimed to travel throughout Asia during his teenage years, but there was no evidence for that. In fact, he was enrolled in an American high school for the 4 years he was at home and as a teenager. So there's no evidence he went to Asia at all. He also claimed to be injured in war, but the government records only indicate that he had one account of conjunctivitis, and there was nothing in the Navy or in any military records that stated that he was actually injured in battle or in war. He also boasted heroic exploits in the Navy, but most of his naval records show his lack of judgment. He once fired on a log that he thought was a Japanese submarine, and he also fired on Coronado Island. I guess just for fun, and he didn't realize that it belonged to Mexico at the time. So he was reprimanded and declared not fit for promotion. And that's really some of the only military records that are available for L. Ron Hubbard. But he was kind of really entranced by naval culture and kind of the structure that went along in his military service. He wrote a ton of pulp fiction. For a penny a word is what he got paid for writing pulp fiction. So he wrote a ton of it to get paid. And he later suggested that his kind of innate ability to write science fiction was a result of the fact that he was able to subconsciously recall past lives, perhaps in galaxies far away, and that happened in the future even. So that was kind of his explanation for why he was so gifted at writing science fiction. He also once had an out-of-body experience during a dental operation And he claimed that that out-of-body experience gave him insights about the world, the universe, and he wrote it all down in a book called Excalibur, although it never got published because he claimed that some who would read it would not be able to handle its depth. In fact, he gave it to somebody to read, and this doctor who read it became so insane that he jumped out of a window 15 minutes after he finished it. And so he chose not to publish Excalibur, and instead he used some of the concepts in a periodical called Survive, and then later into Dianetics. In 46, Hubbard and Jack Parsons, who was I believe he was a rocket scientist, but he was also a follower of Aleister Crowley. They went out into the desert to perform some magical liturgies, occult liturgies. And one of those liturgies was trying to identify a woman who would give birth to the moon child, who would have supernatural powers and abilities. It didn't work. They ended up going into business together, buying and selling boats and yachts on the West Coast. And in the end, Parsons ended up chasing Hubbard down because Hubbard scammed him in those boat sales. And Hubbard stole his girlfriend, Betty, too. So there was some beef there between Hubbard and Jack Parsons.
Who's Crowley?
Aleister Crowley. I'll send you some information about Crowley. He was kind of an occultist leader.
Thank you.
In 1950, Hubbard published Dianetics, which is kind of the core text of Scientology. It's called Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. So initially, as I said, he didn't cast it as a religious text, but in fact, he thought religion was problematic. So he didn't start out to form a religion. But once the IRS and the FDA threatened to censure these methods because people who were practicing were performing medical procedures that were causing medical harm to people, he came to realize that perhaps a religious identity could protect his works, his fortune. And so those who are close to him remember him saying, I'd like to start a religion. That's really where the money is in religion. In 1982, he handed over authority of Scientology to the Religious Technology Center. And in 86, after his death, David Miscavige took over and helped gain designation of Scientology as a religious service organization by the IRS in 1993. And so right now, Scientology is run out of the Gold Base in near Hemet, near Riverside in California here. It's very top secret. There's guard gates everywhere. There's a spiky chain link fence around the whole perimeter of the complex. There's a lot of scandal that's said to have taken place there from those who have escaped Scientology, including there's a prison called The Hole within the compound of Scientology, where those who question or are critical of Miscavige or other Sea Org members are placed there and punished with various forms of solitary confinement and kind of brainwashing type tactics, as well as janitorial services, cleaning toilets with toothbrushes, that kind of thing.
Oh.
The Sea Org, the Sea Organization, was established by Hubbard in 1967. It was presented as a fraternal religious order of young, committed Scientologists who signed a billion-year contract to fight the ongoing cosmic battle against war, narcotics, crime, insanity, and illiteracy. So this was kind of a way for young Scientologists who didn't have a lot of money, who could be kind of workers, free laborers for L. Ron Hubbard. And so they would cook, they would clean, they would maintain his ship that he had bought. And in exchange, they would receive free training in the courses of Scientology from L. Ron Hubbard and others in the organization. Hubbard loved naval culture. And so one of the reasons he got a big boat was when he was under investigation for criminal activity, scamming, He often took the boat out into international waters and stayed out there for years so that he couldn't be brought back under to be subpoenaed to give an interview or anything, and also so that he could have control over his inner circle of followers without governmental interference coming into his compound. And back then, information wasn't as easy to access, and so he could do that on his ship. They had a lot of posters, and Sea Org members dress as naval officers on the boat, as well as in various compounds that they have. Those who try to escape the Sea Org, you're not allowed to escape. You have to go through a formal process of disconnection. But those who don't do that are treated harshly and abused, and there's countless testimonies, collaborative testimonies about what happens within the organization. There's the RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force, which serves to keep Sea Org members in line. And like I said, janitorial service, study of Scientology resources, and solitary confinement were part of that disciplinary action for Sea Org members that didn't toe the line. And then if you left the Sea Org, then you're given a freeloader tab. And so all that free training that you received, now you're required, because of documents you signed, to pay that all back, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's one of the ways that they keep you in it too, is with the threat of having to repay that debt. For their scriptural text, Dianetics is their main text. It comes from the Greek words dia and nous, meaning through the soul, or of the spirit. It's a self-help therapeutic philosophy. It doesn't claim any special divine revelation, but helps with negative emotions and gaining power over phobias. He also has a whole nonfiction library, 12 main books. Are the most important ones that you need to buy. There's a beginner section, and then there's the beginner library. To buy all the formal resources, the core library costs about $4,000. Which many of its critics claim that Scientology is more of a business than a religion, because even when the updated versions come out every few years, committed Scientologists are required to buy the updated versions. So it's a continual monetary stream that is required to maintain your status as a Scientologist. Scientologists are also encouraged to purchase these books and the beginner books so that they can be put in public libraries as well if they don't have them there already. And then the secret texts that are available to higher level Scientologists are very expensive and come under the great threat of secrecy. If they fell into the hands of those who are pre-clear, it would lead to madness or death, Hubbard would claim. There's no worship of God, no guidance on prayer, doesn't publish devotional literature. There's no personal relationship with a God or creator, but rather their concept of God is kind of like Eastern religions. This kind of life force, this non-interventionist, intelligent being who kind of holds the universe together by energy, that doesn't listen to prayers or intervene in history, but who is there in the universe. Some Scientologists call it the supreme being, and that being is infinite and immortal. So Scientologists rely on themselves to kind of unlock the godlike potential within yourselves. This 8 dynamic, if you can pass through these 8 dynamic spiritual conquests, then you can achieve kind of godlike status, like I said before, and be able to do supernatural things. And if you can achieve the 8th dynamic, which is where the supreme being is, then you can also create worlds and universes like the God that created ours did. In the 70s, Scientologists thought of presenting Hubbard as a sort of messiah. And there's even literature that they found that a survey was passed around to Scientologists as well as people, just random people in the community, asking what types of things they would look for in a messianic figure, because they wanted to present Hubbard as a messiah. creation. Theta, the force behind all life, is that which gives life to the cosmos in the form of matter, energy, space, and time, or MEST to Scientologists. So every organism is a theta animated being made up of matter and energy and existing in space and time. So matter, energy, space, and time are those things that can be manipulated, and the things by the kind of the building blocks of our reality. They claim there's a purpose to the universe. The original theta gave a spark to Darwin's primordial soup, and then created life out of that. So a thetan can connect with theta to manipulate matter, energy, space, and time. But if you're unaware, then you're trapped in matter, energy, space, and time. So kind of the goal is to escape matter, energy, space, and time and be completely spiritual in this kind of paradise of spiritual bliss. And so they reject a personal God creating the world, but they also kind of reject modern scientific evolution that it just happened out of no design, purpose, or meaning, but this life force created and designed life to start through the process of evolution. If you go a little bit further into Scientology, this was kind of made public and mainstream through a South Park episode years ago. But what happens is you learn kind of the origin story of our universe, that 75 million years ago, and this is what you learn when you become an operating thetan level 3. This is kind of the secret knowledge that comes. Lord Xenu was the dictator of the Galactic Confederacy, and he transported billions of people to Earth via spaceships, and not as people with bodies, but thetans, these spirit beings that people become when they get a body. And he wanted to destroy them, and so he threw these billions of people into volcanoes, and tried to explode the volcanoes with hydrogen bombs. But the people survived and exist as body thetans. And so these are these spiritual beings that can cling to humans today. And so they're almost kind of like a demonic presence that can attach itself to you. And so with additional training and auditing, you can identify and remove these body thetans with various spiritual technologies and methods. I know that sounds crazy, but that's yeah, that's what they believe. Humanity and sin. They believe man does not have a spirit. He is a spirit. He has a mind and a body. I think I mentioned that before. That people are unequivocally good, born without sin, though we carry with us in our very selves these past traumas. As I mentioned before, they're called engrams. They're misdeeds from present and past lives. And they're not sins in the sense of doing something, evil in God's sight or wrong or not in the right order, but rather things that inhibit you from being a purely spiritual being. So in definition of Scientologists, sin is not missing the mark of perfection, but it's rather false thinking about the material world and space and time. Also, suffering is the result of negative experiences rather than having a sinful nature and the sinful nature of the world. So misdeeds are your own fault, not Scientology's fault. So anything that is wrong in your life, in your spirit, in your body, is all the result of human action against the work of the ultimate goal of human survival, or of spirit survival. So you can look around to any circumstance that is wrong, and it's something that you can achieve if you just work hard enough through the technologies of Scientology. Law and Ethics, The Way to Happiness, was written in 1981 by Hubbard. It included many of the 10 commandments, like don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, don't gossip. It also encouraged kind of American values of honoring government and spiritual authority, as well as taking care of yourself and physically, mentally, emotionally, of self-well-being. Uh, Scientologists are encouraged to do good works and to boast about charitable outreach projects. Narcanon is a Scientology project that's very similar to a 12-step Narcotics Anonymous, but it's based on Scientology's methods and books rather than on the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And so they have various charitable outreach projects. However, they don't believe in unconditional charity. They don't believe in doing good just for the sake of doing good or to help other people. They often require or ask for either a financial contribution or volunteer time in exchange for help that they give to others. And they claim that this is helping people not to just get a handout, which disempowers them, but helps to maintain others' self-respect to be able to pay for services rather than just receive it for free. You can kind of see how this is different in the Christian mindset, which says, we receive everything from God for free. And in thanksgiving and in gratitude towards that, we joyfully and gladly and freely give our lives away for others. It's not a requirement. It's just something we do because of the love that we've received from God. So their ethic in what is good and bad is rooted in consequentialism. It asks whether an action has a good or bad result, instead of whether it's intrinsically right or wrong. And to the Scientologists, anything that is evil or wrong is anything that is destructive more than constructive to the individual, the future race, a group, a species, life, or the physical universe matter that it destroys. So if something is detrimental to you being an operating thetan, then it is evil. And since Scientology holds the keys to ensuring infinite survival, then anything that supports the agenda of Scientology is good, and anything that opposes Scientology is evil. So ultimate goodness is furthering the goals of the Church of Scientology. So you can see how that can easily be manipulated by those in charge of the organization. Scientology also has its own judicial system within itself, and they kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses we shared last week. They don't want you to work things out in the public courts because they believe that they are not enlightened to understand the reality of human life and the universe. So they have their own judicial system that they claim is fair and rapid and protects the decent and productive. And so as long as you are in favor of Scientology and its methods, you will always be found innocent, worthy of rehabilitation. But if not, then you are shunned. You are labeled what's called a suppressive person. You're disconnected. You are disfellowshipped, like we talked about in Jehovah's Witnesses before. So suppressive persons, SPs, are those who invalidate advances in religious technology and hinder the growth of a Scientologist. So basically, if someone is critical of Scientology and will not be brought around, they treat this as the ultimate crime. And so family members and friends are required to report any type of subversive activity, anyone who's going around talking badly about Scientology or critically about it or questioning it, and to shun anyone labeled a suppressive person. So suppressive persons aren't just people who leave the organization. It could be anyone who speaks negatively about Scientology. So probably by sharing these things in this presentation, I would be labeled a suppressive person by Scientologists. And so when people leave the church, they do so realizing that they may never have a meaningful contact again with their spouse, children, friends, and loved ones, if those loved ones remain within the church.
Pastor, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when I think of Scientologists leaving church, is the one I think of is Tom Cruise and his wife, and I think she rejected, the Scientology. But what is his so that by what you just told us, then he should not be able to have any contact with his daughter. Do they make an exception for him because it's Tom Cruise?
I think they make a lot of exceptions for Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Okay.
But his daughter may not be labeled a suppressive person, probably because she's so young, even if his wife is. So if he wants to see his daughter, he can work with his ex-wife, in order to make that happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scientology claims to promote family values and helps couples remain married, but this only applies to those who remain in the Church of Scientology. So if someone leaves Scientology, then divorce is often encouraged. Family values are also de-emphasized for those who go higher up in the organization. So at the age of 6, Sea Org members' children, especially those Sea Org members that are higher up in rank, are sent to boarding schools, one in particular called the Ranch, and they don't really see their kids that often until they join the Sea Org later in life. Also, members are encouraged to have abortions so that they won't be distracted by the demands of raising children. And Leah Remini and others made this public when they left and started doing interviews and things like that in public. Fair game is the concept came up with by L. Ron Hubbard that says that suppressive persons and hostile outsiders basically have no rights. Scientology members must use any means necessary to fight back against attacks on the church. So tricking, suing, harassing, lying, following, scaring, all of these tactics. You can see this is a Scientologist just walking around with a camera filming someone who left the Church of Scientologists everywhere they went. That type of harassment is pretty common, showing up at your place of business, sitting in cars outside of your homes. Those types of things will never result in discipline from the church. And it's all meant to kind of control the narrative around Scientology. And then situational ethics, whereas in Christianity, we have kind of the law of love, where if a specific situation is not explicitly defined in the Bible, like, oh, what do I do here in this situation? Jesus says that loving God and loving your neighbors, that is kind of the law of love. Whatever is good for the other person, that's what you do. But rather in Scientology, the opinion of the leader becomes the law. So really it's what would David Miscavige do? And what would further the agenda of Scientology? That's kind of the situational ethic. There's a great culture of authoritarianism within Scientology that's been documented. An unwavering loyalty to a system of right and wrong allows them to act in immoral ways to preserve the church, as we just mentioned. There's a great admiration for those who submit to recognized authority. Independent and critical thought is not allowed and often leads to reprimands, demotions, and punishments. Aggression against individuals who see the world differently. There's documented cases of intimidation in the higher ranks of Scientology, of David Miscavige punching, kicking, locking people in solitary confinement. There's a pessimistic view of humanity. They claim that people have become confused about the truth through negative effects of engrams. So although humanity is basically good, they're basically confused if you're not a Scientologist. And so they often have negative effects that they portray onto you because of the lack of work in ridding themselves of bad attitudes and agendas. Desire for powerful leaders to demonstrate unwavering strength. They really lift up their leaders as amazing, spiritual, wonderful people. And then the commitment to simple answers and simplistic verbal attacks on opponents. And so Hubbard rejected, modern medicine and science, and when they called him out, and he claimed that they were just jealous of his financial gain. So rather than dialoguing and debating and opening up his research on Dianetics to scrutiny, he just claimed that they were out to attack him, so he attacks them. And so Scientologists also in the same vein dismiss negative reports about the culture of Scientology simply as propaganda and a means for jealous people to destroy Scientology. Salvation is not something that happens necessarily later, but you can achieve salvation in the here and now. Oh, the Hastings are coming back in. So once the word used is total freedom, and you can achieve this through auditing, as well as through advancing through the stages of becoming an operating thetan, through, as we mentioned before, secretive texts that are only available to you through payment of money and training. Someone who is clear has discovered their true selves and works to then clear the world and kind of proselytize for Scientology. The first clear person that happened was Sonia Bianca. L. Ron Hubbard claimed in 1950 he gathered thousands of people together for a demonstration in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium, and he started quizzing her on her memory recall as a way of proving that it worked. However, the event was a major failure, and Sonia didn't remember hardly anything from the training that she had experienced, and so she actually left Scientology. And then, so L. Ron Hubbard said that was a mistake, and John McMaster, a South African man, was the first one to go clear in 1966. Although a year later, John McMaster, he also left Scientology. And also humans operate in the tone scale, which is the spectrum of emotions. So you can kind of gauge whether somebody is spiritually enlightened or not. So if you're dead, you're not spiritually enlightened. Number 40 is supreme beingness. That's like the perfect one. And so if you exhibit apathy, hostility, anxiety, those are all symptoms of emotional illness, and that would be like a 0.1 or a 0.2. But if you have strong interest and enthusiasm, especially about life and about Scientology, that's like a 4 or a 5. And so I put Tom Cruise here because I think we all remember that time he got up on Oprah's couch and started jumping up and down and yelling, and that a lot of people said that was an effort to show his strong interest and enthusiasm to prove that he was an operating thetan and spiritually enlightened. Their concept of Jesus, they're typically ambivalent about Jesus. They claim he is one of the many stages of human philosophy and religion, but he wasn't as clear as Ron Hubbard was about reality. He's also a great example of religious persecution that abused innovative religious thinkers. So just like Hubbard, who was also persecuted, Jesus was an innovative thinker, just not in the same enlightenment as L. Ron Hubbard was. So Jesus anticipated the insights that were made clear by Hubbard, and that he crucified and died, but his message lived on, and he became a symbol of the triumph of the spirit over the material body. So in essence, because he died, his spirit lives on and was reincarnated into another body, perhaps, or perhaps he achieved spiritual enlightenment. They don't know. Hubbard once suggested that the legendary myth of Christ was implanted in pre-clear people 1 million years ago, and that's kind of why Christianity is around, because this thought was implanted into to billions of people who are pre-clear or spirits. Infinite survival is the goal, through typically reincarnation from human to human to a more advanced spiritual state. When Hubbard died, Miscavige said that Hubbard left his body behind and entered higher levels of spiritual existence. And once you reach the highest levels of Scientology, there's just no need for a body anymore. However, they do maintain 2 expensive properties in the hopes and in the expectation that perhaps Hubbard might come back to Earth in another body at some point. They don't have like regular worship services like Christian churches do. Scientology isn't meditative or liturgical, but rather the emphasis is on personal auditing, resource study, and training courses. They have weddings and funerals. They have chaplains that look like pastors, even Scientologist chaplains in the military. And when they give services, they kind of just talk about the creed of Scientology and emphasize personal training, resource study, and auditing. They do naming ceremonies for infants instead of baptism. And their holidays aren't necessarily religious holidays, but more like civil holidays. The celebration of Ron Hubbard's birthday, the launch day of Dianetics, and then they kind of celebrate all their auditors on Auditors Day. And with like things like Mother's Day, they give gifts and encouragement to those who do the work of auditing. And prayer is not really a part of Scientology. they really emphasize technology, not meditation or communication with the divine. And we talked about the symbols as well and what they mean. So it kind of in conclusion, Scientology is, as we mentioned before, this kind of Gnostic type religion that emphasizes spiritual enlightenment through secret ancient texts and ancient ideas that L. Ron Hubbard was the one who gave and found through his advanced spiritual state, and are found in his works. So as you pay money, you can become more advanced and eventually achieve complete total freedom, spiritual enlightenment. So with that, it's 11 o'clock, and I think we thoroughly covered Scientology. Are there any questions or thoughts on Scientology as we close up?
As I said at the beginning, not a good science fiction writer.
Yeah, there's some really funny aspects to it. It's hard to take Scientologists seriously on the outside. But if you do watch, like, there's a documentary called Leah Remini and the Aftermath of Scientology on Netflix. And you kind of get the understanding of just how cultish and entrenched you become in Scientology once you're in it. And you're really kind of like the Jehovah's Witnesses, you're taught to remove yourself from normal life in order to be a good Scientologist.
How many adherents?
Scientology claims about 8 million, but most experts think it's more like 40,000.
And it's just in the US?
Mostly in the US, but there are Scientologist centers overseas as well.
Oh, really? Oh,
In
okay.
South America, I think is the second biggest.
Never heard of it till Tom Cruise.
Yeah, yeah. Celebrity, and financially, they're very well off too. They own a lot of properties, and it's, money flows in. They don't have a ton of overhead.
What, the adherents must all be rich?
They had the tax break too for being a church.
Yep. Yeah, they are religious, so they don't pay income taxes on the sale of their materials or their services.
But if they don't believe that there is a power, a God, how can they be called a religion?
Yeah, and they do claim that there is an ultimate power, but ultimately, kind of like Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, they don't necessarily claim a personal God, but rather a spiritual force, an intelligent spiritual force. So in that same vein, they're considered a religious faith by the IRS.
So that's a form of deism, isn't it? Deists believe in an impersonal, disconnected God that
Force.
formed everything, but then doesn't care about it afterwards.
Yeah, deism. There's also another, I want to say, kind of like Heathism, where there's multiple spiritual beings as well, outside of just the impersonal force, and the fact that we can become spiritual gods, lower G gods. It's maybe a little bit different than straight deism.
Mm.
Good questions. All right, well, we'll end there for today, and we'll do some prayer requests. Of course, for Lori Cook, we'll pray for Lori. I'm going to head over there right now to see her.
I'd like a prayer of thanks, and our son finished his accounting degree.